Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War news update, third part thereof for the 26th of July 2024. We're looking at the geopolitical activity surrounding the war in Ukraine. And we're actually going to start with France, with the coordinated attacks on the TGV, the Train Grande Vitesse in France. The rail network's been hit by a coordinated arson attacks. This is a massive attack on a large scale to paralyze the TGV network. The SNCF, go between French pronunciation and English, told Agence France Presse, adding that many routes would have to be cancelled and the situation would last at least all weekend while repairs are conducted. National train operators said it had been the victim of several simultaneous malicious acts overnight, adding that the attacks affected its Atlantic, Northern and Eastern lines. Crucial cables have been cut and burned. Arson attacks were started in order to damage our facilities, the SNCF said, adding that traffic on the affected lines was heavily disrupted. A further attack was averted in the southeastern line. French media reported the travel plans of about 800,000 French holiday makers will be disrupted this weekend. And of course, all those going to the Olympics is just absolutely terrible. The BBC reports that France's high-speed rail network was hit by malicious acts. This looks like a big problem for the Olympics. Several trains connecting Paris to London on Friday have been cancelled, affected by the massive attack on the TGV high-speed train network. Picture of SNCF employees and French gendarmes inspected the railway tracks on the high-speed line in Croisilles, Pas-de-Calais, targeted by a malicious act. An odd claim, all intelligence services are mobilised to determine the origin of these acts of sabotage, a security source assured Agence France Presse. The modus operandi arson attacks resembles that used by the far left in the past, the same source added. Interesting. When was the far left arson attack against critical infrastructure? Asks Shashank Joshi. Just seems a bizarre thing to suddenly say. An attempted malicious act was prevented last night in Virginie by SNCF agents who made several individuals flee, a source told L'Event Républicain. The events occurred at around 1:15 a.m. at the TGV signalling centre near the Iconé station. The perpetrators of these acts caused fires in gutters where numerous cables pass through fibre optics which transmit safety information for drivers or which control the motors of the points, according to Jean-Pierre Farandou, CEO of SNCF. So, yeah, this is all pretty serious. And lots of people are not talking about how it might be the far left trying to do this. I mean, I guess the far left to do with Gaza, Israel, maybe. But many more people are talking about the potential connections to Russia. So Russian terror attacks in Europe only expanding while Western politicians just hope it goes away, says Jay in Kiev. Combined hacker arson attacks take down France's TGV train network. As was a shopping mall in Poland, it would again prove to be the Russians, he thinks. And to be fair, I told you the other day that fire will be the new low risk, high reward disruptor in Europe and around the world. I think fire is much easier than building up a drone or setting up some explosives. Just set fire to stuff and, watch the chaos follow. As War Monitor says, the high-speed train network in France has been sabotaged by arson and cyber attacks, leaving nearly 1 million passengers stranded before the Paris Olympics. Absolutely terrible for the Olympics, really terrible for the French. I really feel for them. Just is so annoying. If this does turn out to be the Russians, says Chris Owicki, it's a stark reminder that even if we in the West don't consider ourselves to be at war with Russia, Russia most certainly considers itself to be at war with us. It just does make you think. As Jimmy Russian says, the scale and coordination likely points to yet another act of Russian sabotage aimed at the Olympics. $10 opinion is the terrorist attack against a the French high-speed rail network follows a similar pattern of sabotage of the German rail network, which occurred on October the 8th, 2022. In both cases, the attack has been executed with deep knowledge of the rail network, requiring a sophisticated sabotage process, which for criminals or protesters is far too advanced. And that's a really good point. This does smack of something a little bit more sophisticated than some lefties being upset with Gaza. Only enemy nations and their intelligence service operates in that kind of sophistication and precision. With the Olympics at the doorstep, we should remember which nation has been barred from this venue. It is the same nation which benefits from chaos in the West. In the end, it's only the latest reminder that we're already at war, and only one side is dedicated to it. We have to act now. And I don't disagree. All my initial suspicions point towards Russia. I'm not saying definitely, but they are the only nation that has been barred, well, them and Belarus, from the Olympics in any sort of large scale way. This has the hallmarks of Russia all over it, but never know. Romania's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has summoned the Russian chargé d'affaires in Bucharest after the remains of Russian Shahed drones were found on the territory of Romania. That's yesterday. At least one Russian Shahed drone fell on the territory of Romania during strikes on the Ukrainian port of Izmail on the Danube River in the early hours of the 24th. Well, there were claims about the Romanians shooting down drones last night. This might have been one, might have been three drones that ended up in Romanian territory on the 24th. Again, 26th, similar activity potentially. It'd be really interesting if the Romanians have got involved there in shooting down Russian attack drones over the airspace of possibly Ukraine, just into Ukraine there. Now, this is incredibly worrying. A couple of things here concerning Hungary. Hungary has quietly taken a record $1 billion loan from Chinese banks. The loan was provided by the China Development Bank, the Export-Import Bank of China, and the Hungarian branch of the Bank of China. Politico writes. So we are now starting to see Hungary not beholden to loans from the EU, but beholden to loans from China. We have seen Chinese policemen on the streets of Hungary. We have seen infrastructure being bankrolled by the Chinese from Serbia into Hungary. We are seeing Hungary in the sphere of influence of Russia and China to increasing levels over the past weeks and months. This is incredibly worrying. Hungary are compromised, and they are properly compromised. Then you hear something like this. Hungary will now flood the EU with Russians. Oh my goodness, if this isn't a security issue of just huge proportions. This appears to come from Forbes Hungary. The Hungarian government says, Pete, who is a Hungarian man researching geopolitics, passionate about Hungarian politics and the Ukraine conflict, advocating truth, despising lies, fact-checking stuff, NAFO. So here's a guy that says, the Hungarian government has introduced a national card from July that allows Russian and Belarusian guest workers, scare quotes, guest workers, to enter the country without the usual security screenings. This policy, which follows the closure of the controversial Russian-controlled International Investment Bank, or Spy Bank, has raised significant national security concerns. Key points include, the national card system allows workers from 8 countries, including Russia and Belarus, to enter Hungary without a cap on numbers and without specific job restrictions. The card simplifies the application process and does not require proof of job demand and allows family reunification. Although the card is ostensibly to facilitate projects like the PAX-2 nuclear plant, the need for large numbers of Russian workers for this project is questionable, given existing Russian presence and the slow progress due to regulatory issues. Security expert Andras warns that the policy could open a loophole similar to the IIB, potentially allowing large numbers of Russians to enter Hungary with minimal oversight, posing a significant national security risk. This policy could also facilitate the movement of Russians within the Schengen zone, bypassing the restrictions faced by typical work permits. So in other words, once you're into the EU as a Russian, then because of the Schengen zone where you've got free movement of people, one of the 4 pillars of free movement of capital, services, labour, etc., and products, you've got this free movement, which is a neoliberal economic ideal, but that free movement of people means that if you allow Russians in the back door, you've got Russians all throughout Europe now. This is a really big deal. The lack of clear necessity for such a broad and unregulated entry mechanism for Russian and Belarusian workers, combined with the potential for inadequate security vetting, raises serious concerns about the implications for Hungary and a wider Schengen area. Absolutely, this is incredible. I mean, I'd like to see this in the mainstream media reported more. This does seem like it's incredibly dodgy. USA has imposed sanctions against 6 individuals and 5 organizations in China that contribute to the development of North Korea's ballistic and space programs. So trying to tighten those loopholes concerning China and China's support of North Korea and thus Russia in terms of weapons development. Right, now onto US politics, but only as it pertains to Ukraine. Support Ukraine now, first of all, this, which is the Dutch. So there's a Dutch report that's come out saying we need to support Ukraine now or pay more later. So the two Dutch think tanks, the Klingendale Institute of International Relations and the Hague Center for Strategic Studies, have released a paper, and it concludes a Ukrainian victory, even if it occurs in the long term and requires extensive and prolonged support from Western powers, is by far the best outcome for Europe across all dimensions, except for the increased risk of nuclear escalation associated with the Russian defeat and a short-term financial cost of supporting Ukraine. The cost-benefit analysis of this outcome is the most favorable. Pay more now to pay less later. However, a future American administration may decide that for the US, a protracted conflict in which Russia remains tied down in the long term is a more cost-effective strategy than a Ukrainian victory. That's really interesting. A future American administration may decide that for the US. So this isn't like definitive, but it's saying, and this is one of the theories that's been proposed many times as to why Ukraine is being drip-fed American support, is that long-term degradation of Russia over a protracted period and conflict will mean that Russia is definitely less able to be a threat on the global stage for many, many years to come, rather than a short Ukrainian victory that would allow Russia to get back on its feet relatively quickly. Third point, even if the Americans completely cease or significantly reduce support to Ukraine, it remains a preferred strategy for Europe to continue fully supporting Ukraine, as the costs of Russian victory on all dimensions are much higher than those of a protracted conflict. So even if you go for a short victory or a protracted conflict with an eventual Ukrainian victory, it's still better to support Ukraine than the alternative. Letting Russia win is going to cost Europe way more than not. Okay, so that's interesting, and it goes through the different scenarios in the Euromaidan press article. I won't go through that now. Ukrainian victory, benefits of victory, costs of victory. Second scenario is protracted conflict, limited benefits and untenable outcome. Scenario 3, a Russian victory, and of course what would come about with the Russian victory, so on and so forth, and which outcomes are preferred by Europe and the US. So there might be a bit of a difference between the European idea of what should happen and the American idea. Okay, going on to American politics here. Russian propagandists are getting worried about Donald Trump's chances of beating Kamala Harris as they remark about simplistic tactics and sexist language embraced by Republicans. One pundit complained that Russian state TV is always talking about America. So you have America's definitely on the tip of the Russian tongue quite consistently, and the elections that are developing there, with Kamala Harris suddenly coming onto the scene and creating this sense of excitement for many, not everyone, but for many, has caused Russian propagandists to react against that and worried that the Trumpian approach of talking about identity and her being a woman and her being a person of color is too simplistic and is problematic, and they are worried that that would lead to Trump being beaten. Interesting there that they are getting involved in assessing the GOP tactics. Now, this is an AI produced meme here, but I'm a black American female who would never vote for Kamala Harris. I've told you about this before. Anyone that starts off a tweet or a Facebook status or whatever saying, I am an X and I used to vote for Y, but now I'm going to vote for Z or whatever, is typical of your troll and troll comment, and it should set alarm bells ringing. Well, this meme kind of says it all. These big Russian guys sitting on computers saying, I'm a black American female woman and would never vote for Kamala Harris. Anyway, just thought that was quite indicative of the situation. So, foreign policy. What are the foreign policy chops of Kamala Harris? Well, actually, Chatham House have released an article on this. As a senator who served on the Intelligence and Homeland Security committees overseeing some of the most highly classified and controversial aspects of US national security policy, she is in a good position. US presidents tend to develop their thinking on foreign policy as they grow into the role. In that respect, Biden and Trump were exceptions. And actually, you've got Kamala Harris, who has been on the international scene quite a bit. So this is a Chatham House sort of think tank article concerning her foreign policy skills and experience. Other than Biden, Americans must go all the way back to George H.W. Bush in 1989 to find a president who would take office with more foreign affairs experience than Harris. So she is someone with big foreign affairs experience. Harris is a stable and well-respected foreign policy team. Has a stable and well-respected foreign policy team in her role as vice president. Her national security advisor, Phil Gordon, and his deputy, Rebecca Lissner, are both experienced Washington hands who served in previous administrations. Both have published books that suggest a subtle shift away from an America that leads the world aggressively and alone. So it's working with others to tackle the threats around the world rather than single-handedly going for it, or on the other hand, rather than isolating and going back in themselves. Now, what is going to, and I'll talk about this in my US elections update later, but her position on Gaza is going to be insanely important, I think. And she has a subtle difference from Biden, which is, I think, important. But the point is that she is potentially in a good position to become president, and she will be an experienced foreign policy hand there, which I think is worth taking into account. Now, this has no report, says no comment, but leaves this here. So here is a video of Trump and JD Vance talking about Ukraine.
President Zelensky called me, and we had a good talk. And I said, we got to get this war over. This is a war machine. You're facing a war machine. That's what they do, is they fight wars. They beat Hitler. They beat Napoleon.
I'm going to start this again, actually. I want you to concentrate on what Trump says and think how much of what he's saying is actual substance. Think about this all the time he ever speaks, right? How much is actual substance, actual policy, concrete policy substance, and how much is fluff and guff, right? And you'll notice that almost 100% of what Trump says is fluff and guff. And actually, the way he speaks sounds like, oh, this is quite sensible, he's got these opinions, but actually they're vacuous, they're completely vacuous, and they're nothing. They're like, oh, wars are terrible, we should stop it, I'll stop it, there you go. No, how are you going to do this? Where's the actual, where's the detail that we need here? There's none. Literally none ever. So you should be super worried about someone that plans on taking over the role of president of the US that appears to have no real grasp of the details of foreign policy scenarios and just presents this fluff and guff.
President Zelensky called me, and we had a good talk. And I said, we got to get this war over.
Well, yeah.
This is a war machine. You're facing a war machine. That's what they do, is they fight wars. They beat Hitler.
You're facing a war machine. This is what they do. They fight wars. What are you talking about? Of course a war machine fights wars. It means nothing. It means nothing.
Beat Napoleon. They're fighting a war.
What? What are you talking? They beat Napoleon. Russia beat Napoleon. Well done. They're fighting a war. Yes, we know this. So thanks for telling us almost nothing.
And the spring offensive never happened. And here they had millions of mines put down, and they had thousands of army tanks, meaning the Russians. And I said,
Army
we got to get
tanks.
this war over with. A lot of Russians being killed, but a lot of Ukrainians being killed. It's a whole mess. Should have never happened. Biden should have never allowed this to happen.
So it's all Biden's fault for allowing this to happen. So he just allowed Russia to invade. It was just Biden himself was standing at the border saying, no, 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 no. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, yes, come in, come in. So Biden just allowed them. Sorry, I would have stopped you, but I'm just going to allow you in.
Was an easy stop. This was zero chance of happening. And President Putin would have never done it. Never, ever. Two reasons. Number one, the oil prices were low. I kept them low. I kept gasoline low. I kept oil low. And as soon as these guys came in, the oil went to almost $100 a barrel, which is double what it should be. And all of a sudden, he's got tremendous amounts of money that he didn't have. I think one of the reasons Putin went in is because when he saw Afghanistan, the way we got out, when people saw that, like Putin, like President Xi of China, strong guy, strong man, President Zelensky
He can't help saying, as soon as he mentions Xi, a strong guy, strong man, strong guy, strong man. So, like, his interpretation of how the war in Ukraine started is Biden let them in, Biden allowed the war to happen. It wouldn't have happened because I had strong oil prices, and it was all to do with oil prices, not to do... I mean, Putin wrote an essay that pretty much laid out what he's going to do, and this goes back to 2014 and had nothing to do with oil prices then. Like, it's like listening to a child that's like, oh, look, it happened because I drew this really colourful picture and they wouldn't allow me to give this really colourful picture I drew with crayons. So it's all about me and my picture. And like, if they'd allow me to give this picture to Putin, then Putin wouldn't have done it. And that's why it happened. It's like, freaking hell, mate. Like, we're adults. Come on. Like, anyway, just listening to him talk about anything, it drains my intellect out of my brain. It just sucks the rationality from my eyeballs, and then I'm just left like with my head lolling, just asking to be drip fed, I don't know, Valium. Anyway, foreign policy I don't think is his forte, is kind of what I'm trying to say, and that is concerning, the war in Ukraine, and it is very concerning. Take care, guys. Speak soon. Toodle pips.